So jumping into match number 4 here, we're against a Shenhemo deck, or Shenhe double Animo deck, and actually another YouTube channel does some great guides. Blepcat made a video on that deck very recently. I'll link it in the description, so check it out if you're interested. Now, as for our starting hand here, we don't have the keycards we're looking for in Paimon, Lieben, Liu Su. But if we keep strategize, we might have the one die to find one of those, and we do end up finding a Lieben to start with. Now, we'll want to start probably with Raiden's Shogun, because this is likely to be a 3-turn game, and getting that summoned out on turn 1 is going to be critical. And we've got some Electro Dice, so that's really what we need. Now, against this deck, it's often useful to be able to deploy the Xiangling summon on turn 1 as well, because the overload reaction pushing them off their active character can be very powerful. And we'll get to that, but the consequence of that is we want to use the toss-up before we do anything else this turn to get some extra Electro and Pyro dice. Now this isn't necessarily something you'd expect, because we have the Lieben, don't we, to maybe use the extra dice, and therefore we only need the Electro ones, right? But no, it is going to be useful to have the Pyro dice as well. We don't quite get there, unfortunately. We're one Pyro die off being able to use Raiden and Xiangling's skill here. We do have the extra die to draw with, so we go ahead and use the draw before using anything else, and then we play Raiden's elemental skill. So opponents use their Shenhe to get some Icy Quills, which buff their Cryo attacks and Cryo Swirls, and actually they have quite a strong follow-up to that here, using a quick swap to immediately trigger a Swirl, and you'll see how powerful the Swirls this set can be. So that's 4 damage dealt by that reaction, and it spread that Cryo element to my off-field characters. So that's the really scary thing about the Shenhemo deck you need to be aware of. The Swirls are very powerful. So in this situation, what can we do to make the most of the rest of our turn? Our opponents mostly out of dice, so they're not going to be able to use any other skills, and we have 4 dice left over. Now, by default you might expect to swap to Xiangling here, play a Lieben, end the turn, but our opponent's going to be able to end the turn before us, which means that if we're ending on Xiangling, they can immediately just trigger another Swirl with their Sucrose, push us off our Xiangling. We won't even get to use our Xiangling skill before that happens, and we'll be in a really bad spot. So, in order to avoid this, we don't want them being on Sucrose. If we overload them off their Sucrose by using Xiangling's elemental skill, then they'll be on Kazuha, and Kazuha can still swirl on our Xiangling, but he at least won't push us off the Xiangling. But still, if they can swirl, they can do a lot of damage. So the best way I can figure out here is, if we can use the Xiangling elemental skill, but then end on Raiden, then they won't be able to trigger a swirl on their next turn. And that's exactly what we're going to do. Now, this also means we'll have both of our summons available, so we can go straight to Nahida next turn. And since this game is likely to be over in just a couple of turns, we do want to get started on that as soon as possible. So swapping back to Raiden here, we'll have 1 die left over to put into our Lieben, and we're already starting about planning next turn and how we're going to play to actually get the rest of the dice into this Lieben to get the value out of it. Here we go, at the end of the turn, the overload triggers on Sucrose, pushes them onto Kazuha, and if Kazuha can't swirl, then he's not really going to be able to get value, so opponent's probably going to have to swap off their Kazuha since they are going first. Looking for dice here, ideally Dendro dice, and we've got a few already, so that's fantastic. Otherwise we'll be following maybe our Liu Su, since it's going to be a bit late for that Liu Su to get value. We can't even really afford to play it here, because if we want to use Nahida's E skill and save the 2 dice for our Lieben, we're not going to have the one die spare for Liu Su. So we're just going to swap straight to Nahida. Opponents swap to their Shenhe since they couldn't swell off their Kazuha, so it's fine to be on Nahida now, even though he's got Cryo Aura. And opponents using their normal attack, presumably because they're saving Cryo Dice to use their burst on this turn as well, which will again, that will buff all of their Cryo Swirl reactions by an extra +1 damage. So it's very, very powerful if they can keep triggering Swirls. As is, we are going to be able to use these 2 dice to trigger our Lieben. The only question we've got left over is, do we play this Sweet Madame? Do we need that 1 health on a character right now? Well, the burst is dealing 2 damage at the end of the turn, and we'll have the chance next turn to play it if we need to, so there's no reason to play that Sweet Madame right now. We're just going to end the turn, and if opponent ends on Shenhe, that's pretty great for us. We'll get to trigger a burning reaction at the start of next turn. We'll get a catalyzed reaction as well on this turn, and we'll start to get lots of value out of our Seeds of Skandha, and that's exactly what happens. So we'll be starting on Nahida next turn with extra dice from our Lieben, some extra cards in our hand, and hopefully enough options to finish off this game. We do have critically an I Haven't Lost Yet in our hand, and obviously the more you draw, the more likely you are to have critical cards. We're looking specifically for Dendro Dice as a priority. We haven't been too lucky, but the Pyro Dice are also useful potentially, because we're looking to be potentially using the burst on Xiangling after our Nahida dies. We drew a Gambler's Earrings artifact, which helps us a bit with the fact that some of our dice aren't useful, or rather they would need to be tuned, and we can start to get a bit just extra net +1 die by using the Gambler's Earrings here now, even though our Nahida is about to die. So we're not going to get a chance to use this burst on Nahida, and we didn't have any food in our hand that would have solved that, unfortunately, but this is fine too, since after opponent uses their Sucre skill and we're switched to our Xiangling here forcibly, we will have the option to use Xiangling's burst. Here we go. And killing Shenhe was actually relevant even after Shenhe's burst was out, because the opponent didn't have any Icy Quill stats left over, and therefore, while their Swirls are powerful here, they're not as powerful as they could be if they did have those Icy Quill stats. So opponents on Kazuha now, they can trigger some Swirls almost certainly, using the elemental skill here. And we've just got a few more moves left before the game will be over. If we use a normal attack on our Xiangling here, then opponent is forced to have a food in order not to just lose at end of turn. The summon is going to deal 2 to our Xiangling, so opponent is incentivized to maybe use a skill on our Xiangling in order to deal some efficient damage, otherwise our Xiangling will be left on 1 health. We don't really want to switch to our Radiant Shogun, because if we do, they can potentially trigger another swell. So we'll just use our normal attack on Xiangling here. So opponent would need a food to save their Kazuha, maybe an extra Cryo Dice so they could actually use a normal attack or a skill here. But even then, if we're going first next turn, we should be able to have the damage we need to close out the game. So this is pretty much checkmate here, and with opponent left with only 1 card and 4 health on their Kazuha, we will be able to get there just by ending the turn. Just double checking that. Some nerve setting in at 3-0 at this point. But yeah, ending the turn here gets us the win. So the key takeaway against the deck Shenhemo is being as careful as you can to play around their Swirls, and reduce the value they can get from their reaction. But it is still a very strong, very scary deck.